This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Kansas Farm Service Agency Farm Loan Chief Josh Ritter begins today's show discussing the Emergency Loan Program and Inflation Reduction Act with FSA. Continuing the show is K-State Poultry Specialist Scott Beyer to talk about chickens as it is National Chicken Month. He mentions a few key considerations for people to keep in mind when it comes to chicken care. Rounding out the show is K-State Beef Cattle Institute's Brad White, Phillip Lancaster, and Dustin Pendell conversing about if cattle producers should sell at weaning or retain ownership. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show with an update from the Farm Service Agency. And today we're joined with Kansas Farm Service Agency Farm Loan Chief Josh Ritter. Josh, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on the show.
And Josh, wanting to talk about a program today that many Kansas producers might want to take the time to look into, as we've had many unfavorable conditions when it comes to agriculture.
Yeah, we do have an emergency loan program through FSA, and that program is available to help producers recover from production and physical losses due to disasters such as drought, but also flooding and other natural disasters too. But primarily drought is what we're dealing with, like you said, in nearly all of our counties right now. So I think it's a good time to be talking about this program.
If producers are thinking about this program, what can it be used for?
Yeah, our emergency loan funds may be used to restore and replace property essential to the farm operation, pay all or part of production costs associated with the disaster year, pay essential family living expenses, reorganize the farm operation, and refinance certain debts.
So possibly helping producers just make it to the next year and hopefully not have another natural disaster.
Correct, yeah. Yep.
And so who is eligible for this program?
Yeah, that's a good question. Emergency loans can be made to farmers and ranchers who they need to own or operate land located in a county declared by the president or designated by the Secretary of Agriculture as a primary disaster area. All counties contiguous to the declared or designated primary counties are also eligible for the emergency loan program. So if a county is designated, any county that touches it's contiguous, so they're going to be in part of that program too. So that farmer rancher needs to be an established farm operator and have sufficient farming and ranching experience. They need to be citizens or permanent residents of the United States. They have to have suffered at least a 30% loss in crop production or a physical loss to livestock products, real estate, or chattel property. They need to have an acceptable credit history. They have to be unable to receive credit from a commercial source. They need to be able to provide collateral to secure the loan, and they also have to have repayment ability.
And you mentioned an established farm operator. So are there some kind of qualifications that makes them an established farm operator?
Really, it's just that they need to be operating that farm while the drought's hitting. So they have to have an established farm. So they can't be coming in for a new loan and trying to start up a farm.
Josh, you mentioned an acceptable credit history. And so how do producers know if they qualify for having an acceptable credit history? Yeah,
really what that looks at is we'll just look at repayment history and things like that and make a decision based on that. No real credit score minimums or anything. We don't really even look at credit scores necessarily. So we encourage everybody to come in, but we just look at that repayment history. So,
what are some of those requirements for this emergency loan program?
Sure, and these, our loan requirements are different from those of other lenders, and some of our more significant differences are borrowers must keep accurate and acceptable farm records. They have to operate in accordance with the farm plan they develop and agree to with the local FSA staff, and they may be required to participate in financial management training program and obtain crop insurance.
For people who are listening and think this emergency loan program sounds like something that would be beneficial to their operation, do they have to have had worked with the Farm Service Agency before, or could this possibly be the first time working with FSA?
I think really it could be the first program they're working with us on. So odds are they've been in for something probably, but if they haven't, they can still come in and check this out. So.
And important to keep good records then for a lot of this work to be eligible and meet the requirements.
Correct, yep.
You mentioned collateral, and is that something that's really important when it comes to being able to secure an emergency loan program with FSA?
Yeah, all of our emergency loans have to be fully collateralized. So that means that there needs to be enough security available to make sure the loan is a fully secured loan. So we have to make sure we're not undersecured in any way. The specific type of collateral will vary depending on the loan purpose, repayment ability, and the individual circumstances of the applicant. A first lien is required by FSA on property or products acquired, produced, or refinanced with our loan funds.
Josh, for our Ag Today listeners that are currently thinking through this and think that it might be something for them, could you talk a little bit about the loan limit and loan terms for this program?
Yeah, I can do that. Producers can borrow up to 100% of actual production or physical losses to a maximum amount of $500,000. Loan for crop, livestock, and non-real estate losses are normally repaid within 1 to 7 years, depending on the loan purpose, repayment ability, and collateral available as security. In special circumstances, terms up to 20 years may be authorized. Loans for physical losses to real estate are normally repaid within 30 years, but may be extended to a maximum of 40 years if, once again, there's some certain circumstances met. The current interest rate of the emergency loan program for an operating loan type purpose is 5%, and the current interest rate for an emergency loan for a real estate type purpose is 5.125%. One thing to keep in mind with those interest rates is they are adjusted monthly, but once you close a loan, they are fixed for the life of that loan.
And natural disasters can happen whenever, so is there really a deadline for this program?
Yeah, there is actually an application deadline for this emergency loan program. Applications for emergency loans must be received within 8 months of the county disaster designation date. So, you might just have to go into your local office and see when that date was that you were designated and really make sure if you're interested in this program, you get an application in within that 8-month period.
We've obviously focused our conversation a little bit more towards drought just because of the year we've had and the lack of moisture we've had. However, taking the time to remind people that this loan is for all natural disasters and not just drought.
Right, yep. Anything that was declared, it could be drought, flooding, high wind damage, anything like that. And
it's Kansas, so who knows what it could be. And if producers are wanting to find out more information about this FSA loan program, where can they do that?
Yeah, I recommend that they start with their local FSA office. We do have 21 farm loan program sites in Kansas, so if your local office isn't the one that administers the program, they should be able to get you the contact information for the FLP site you'll need to work with.
And is there a way that producers can figure out if they have one of those service sites in their area?
That's a good question. And really, you could probably visit a website and check, but really the easiest thing is just to go in and to your local office and ask. So,
moving our topic of conversation now to discussing something else loan-related, and that being, Josh, is there assistance available to current FSA farm loan borrowers under the Inflation Reduction Act?
Yeah, there is some assistance available to current FSA direct loan borrowers under, and it's Section 22006 of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is kind of a mouthful. But right now, those direct loan borrowers with qualifying loans can request Inflation Reduction Act assistance through what they're terming the cash flow-based assistance provisions. Under those cash flow-based assistance, borrowers who are unable to pay their upcoming installment or have already missed a recent installment payment can request cash flow analysis from FSA. If after that analysis, FSA determines that the borrower qualifies for cash flow-based assistance, FSA will make a one-time credit to the borrower's account in the amount of the missed or upcoming direct loan installments.
And so what is a qualifying loan in this instance?
Those qualifying loans are right now there are direct loans, and those would include farm ownership loans, operating loans, emergency loans, and also conservation loans.
How can producers, if they think they qualify this, submit a request for cash flow-based assistance?
Yeah, there's a couple ways for them to do that. Borrowers can always go into their local FLP office and submit that information. And they can also make their request electronically by visiting farmers.gov /IRA 22006 cash flow. Kind of a mouthful there, but yeah, that's one way they recommend doing that. Easiest thing is probably just to go into your local office and talk with them. I want to point out that those requests, what we're really looking for is a cash flow projection for the current operating year and also a balance sheet that's less than 90 days old. And that's all that needs to be submitted for this program.
And who could possibly be eligible for this cash flow-based assistance?
It's really geared towards FSA direct loan borrowers with qualifying FLP loans who are unable to pay their upcoming installment or have already missed a recent installment. The installment due date that was missed or is going to be missed must have been between August 1st, 2022 and January 15th, 2024. Those borrowers must be able to demonstrate that they are or were unable to develop a feasible cash flow for the current production cycle. So they have to, really what we're looking at is they're showing that there's a shortfall in that cash flow for this operating year.
For people who submit an application, how do those then get reviewed?
Yeah, those requests will be processed by the local FLP office in the order in which they're received. The borrower is going to receive a letter from the reviewer, either requesting additional information if needed, or a letter informing them that their request was received and will be processed as quickly as possible. Borrowers should just, once again, contact their local FLP office if they have any questions regarding assistance available to them under the Inflation Reduction Act.
Josh, as always, for anything FSA related, where can people find out more information?
Yeah, I mean, I guess they can always go to the FSA website and look there, but I guess maybe I'm more old school than some because I would always encourage people to go into their local office or pick up the phone and call because that's where you're going to get your best information.
Josh, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and give us an update from the Kansas Farm Service Agency.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
That was Kansas Farm Service Agency Farm Loan Chief Josh Ritter. You can find out more information about this program and act by going to farmers.gov or going to your nearest service center. If you don't know where your nearest service center is, you can find it by going to the farmers.gov website and going in the upper right-hand corner and clicking on Service Center. If you're specifically looking for more information about the Inflation Reduction Act, you can find it by going to farmers.gov/IRA 22006 cash flow. I will link all of these resources in today's show notes on acttoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and continuing our Wednesday show, we're discussing National Chicken Month, and in to share some of his knowledge and talk about chickens, we have K-State Poultry Specialist Scott Beyer. Scott, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
September is National Chicken Month, and Scott, starting off the conversation discussing the impact poultry has had not only on the state of Kansas, but also the whole country.
Yeah, the poultry industry of course, includes eggs, turkeys, and chicken. This is National Chicken Month. It's the one thing we don't really produce in Kansas on a commercial scale, but we have commercial eggs, commercial turkeys. Game bird industry is huge, and we have some breeder operations in Kansas.
And thinking about chickens, a lot of times kind of just the backyard chickens of kind of almost a hobby pet.
Yes. I'll tell you what, there are more hobby chickens in Kansas than there ever has been. And it's a result of, it had two major causes. One was the economy issue back in 2008 and 2009. Everybody decided they wanted to produce protein at home. And then the second one, of course, was COVID. And everybody wanted to stay home and take care of, pets and all that kind of stuff and, growing a garden. And you couldn't even buy a baby chick for a year.
As it seems more and more people are raising chickens, even if it's just in their backyard, now is a great time to mention a few ways they can get ill, and one of them being the highly pathogenic avian influenza.
Yes, avian flu has been, we had one outbreak in 2015. It started again in about 2021 or so. It seems to be kind of hitting its peak, and we hope going down now. Like most viruses, it sort of lays low in the summertime but comes back in the fall, and our big reason is because it's linked to being spread by waterfowl that are migrating south when it gets cold.
And are there other than illnesses that producers just need to keep in mind as well?
Oh, absolutely. There are, birds have a lot of different opportunities to get sick with normal bird diseases, and we have to take care of those too.
And what are a few ways that producers need to keep in mind when it comes to keeping their flock hopefully healthy?
How do you keep a small flock healthy? That's a good question I always get. What I try to do is start with a good, healthy set of stock, whether it be pullets or whether it be chicks that you get. And once you get them isolated and take care of them, actually chickens are relatively disease-free. It's when they start interacting and spreading things around from either trading or sales or wild birds coming in and things like that. But if you keep if you go down and buy a set of chicks and grow them up and keep them for their productive life, most people never have a single problem.
Scott, for people who are wanting to get into the poultry business, what's a good quantity of chickens to start out with?
Everybody, it depends on what they want them for. Most everybody wants eggs. That's a big one. I always tell people that if you're going to get some that are fancy, the fancier they are, the less they'll produce overall. The more common breeds and hybrid crosses are going to produce a lot more. So you got to be careful if you go in and get 20 chicks of hybrid crosses and you get 20 eggs a day versus, 20 old-fashioned breeds and you get 6 eggs a day. That's a big difference. I had somebody call and complain one time after they purchased pullets at our sale. And she says, I have too many eggs. What am I going to do with them? And I said, I have no idea. And she says, why did you sell me so many pullets? Because now I have too many eggs. So, it depends on what you're after.
On talking about pullets, that is the young version of a chicken.
Yeah, in our industry, a pullet, a lot of people like pullets because they don't have to go through the mess of raising a chick. They buy a mature hen that's just starting to lay, and they will be able to keep them for all their productive life.
Talking about keeping chickens and their productive life, we're kind of entering the time frame where chickens may be producing a few less eggs.
Yes, and people are surprised to learn that it's light that regulates egg production. And so it's a little bit difficult to explain, but part of the annual process of a bird is to go through a laying cycle. Part of that is also molting. And so if you think about it, you'd like to molt and replace your feathers right when it's about to get really cold. So Mother Nature kind of takes care of that by shortening the day length, and then there's a hormonal response, and they'll stop laying during that shorter period of time. And that usually happens right around state fair time. In fact, I was at the state fair this weekend, and I saw birds molting in the show cages. To prevent that, keep the lights at 16 hours a day. To allow them to molt and go out of production, turn the lights off and let it go natural. And after they're finished molting, you can turn the lights back to 16 hours during the winter, feed them regular laying feed, and they'll go back into 100% production. So I always recommend people do that at least once a year, unless they just got chicks or pullets that spring. So if they have new birds, then I ask them to keep the lights on all winter, all the way till next summer, until June 21st, and then pull your plug on the lights. And what that does is that allows them to go through a natural molt at a perfect time.
And so you mentioned losing feathers, and that is part of the molting process then?
That's the molting process. When your bird loses feathers, it will not replace any feather that got torn out or picked out or broken. It will not replace it until it goes through a full molt. And having a molt in the fall is perfect because you're going to have cold winter, and you're going to have a bird that survives better during the winter with all its feathers intact. So if you have older birds, then you turn your lights off on June 21st, let them go natural. They'll continue to lay, and somewhere around state fair time, you'll start seeing them slowly go out of production, start molting. Somewhere around the end of October, they'll look nice and clean with all new feathers. Plug your light back in, put it on 16 hours, and a week or two, you'll start getting eggs back for the rest of winter. Now, if they're brand new, young birds, don't do that. Keep them going because they're young and they can go right through winter without going through a molt.
So it's important to let the chickens have that time to have a molting process.
Oh, absolutely. They also rebuild their skeletal system, and they put more calcium back in the bone structure, and so you have a better quality egg when they come out of a molt.
Scott, we talked about keeping chickens healthy and the importance of making sure they stay safe, so hopefully not having to go to that vet.
Yes. Keep that flock isolated. I think that's the best thing you can do. Know where you get your stock. Keep it closed. And if you keep them generally away from other birds, you will have far fewer issues over the life of your flock than if you accept a few birds here and there. That's how diseases get spread around.
What are a few of those different purposes for chickens?
Well, I had a good question on different breeds and what I should purchase. I always tell people it depends on what you're after. If it's going to be just a hobby flock, I think all of us will justify the feed bill as long as they pay us back in a few eggs. And, efficiency works better if the birds are smaller and lay a larger egg. So the commercial hybrid crosses are probably going to be better in that category. If you go with some of the standard breeds, like you would see at the state fair, like Rhode Island Reds or Buff Polish and all that kind of stuff, those are really pretty to look at. But generally, they're selected for show more than they are production. And I get a lot of people who call me up and say, I got this flock of 20 chickens, and 2 eggs a day is just not doing it for me because it's not paying the feed bill. So I recommend that they get a hybrid cross, and they're usually available at most of the sources that are selling chicks, either at a local hardware store or by mail order. They're really good. They live very long. And then you still got one more choice when it comes to eggs. You can either go with a white egg producer or you can go with a brown egg producer. And that's an important choice because the white egg producer is the most efficient, but they're the least friendly. So if you're looking for backyard birds that are going to kind of be semi-pets, then you'd rather choose the ones that lay brown eggs. In fact, I would think they're almost too pet-friendly. They're always begging for snacks. They're always hanging around the porch. They're always wanting some kind of handout, and that's problem number 2. They're less efficient because they have more body weight, but they do produce a lot of good brown eggs.
That's some interesting information, Scott. And you've spent many years working with K-State and within the poultry industry. And could you give us an overview of K-State Poultry?
We have companies coming in looking for employees. Our industry in the poultry side is short of employees. Like a lot of agriculture today, it's been really tough to locate employees, and so they have a high demand for students here. And we do have, and nationwide, not only in Kansas, we have students at almost all our facilities here in Kansas working in jobs locally, but we also have nationwide opportunities, broiler turkeys and egg production.
Scott, as someone who's spent many years interacting with chickens, what's your favorite breed?
That's a great question. I'm going to go with one that most people won't know. I like a cream leg bar, okay? It's not in the book, technically. So it's not technically in the show book yet. Why I like it, it's a 3-way cross of breeds, and it is an excellent egg producer. Very nice eggs, blue tinted. The eggs are blue tinted, but here's the best part. When they hatch, you can tell males from females on day 1. They're 2 different colors. So if you're hatching chicks at home, you already know who the males are and who the females are. We have a lot of communities that allow them to have poultry, and some of them don't allow males or roosters. So that may be an opportunity to choose a breed and know from the very beginning that you definitely don't get any males that won't be producing eggs. And that's why I like it. It's a very hardy bird, very feed efficient. Don't take it to the county show because it won't qualify for showing.
Scott, if you're eating chicken, how are you going about cooking it, or what's your favorite way to eat it?
That's easy. I put them on a smoker and cook them all day.
That was K-State poultry specialist Scott Beyer. If you'd like to learn more information about poultry at K-State, I'll provide a link in today's show notes on agday.net. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show now with the Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts.
Hi, welcome to Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts, where our experts answer your questions. And I've got 2 great experts here today, Dr. Phillip Lancaster.
Good morning, Brad.
And Dr. Dustin Pendell.
Morning.
So they're here to answer the question relative to should I sell at weaning, or should I consider retained ownership through the feeding phase? And based on their answers, they'll get up to 10 points. Dustin, I'm going to you first.
I'm going to sell at weaning for a few reasons. Number one, I'm a risk-averse producer, and so I don't want to take on that extra risk keeping those calves a little longer. They could die. So I'm not a big risk fan. Second of all, cash flow. I want the money now so I can pay the bills. And so those are kind of 2 of my thoughts. And then there's other things like, I don't have a good relationship maybe with a feed yard and stuff. So I'm going to sell at weaning.
Okay. Good start for Dustin. 5 points for him. Phillip?
I'm going to say it depends. I'm going to give the economist answer right off the bat. I think you got to pay attention a little bit to the market. I like retained ownership if the market is right. So like here, recently we've been on a climb as far as fed cattle prices and things like that. So, but what's going to happen in the future? And when we're on that downhill slide, obviously that's not a good time to retain ownership. But since I own the calves now, I'm in the driver's seat. And so I can decide whether I want to retain ownership or if I want to go ahead and sell them from that perspective. But then, just also making sure you're penciling out the cost of and the value of gain and the cost of gain to get them there.
Good answer, except for that it depends. I'll pin you down a little bit. But how am I going to know the value of gain and cost of gain if I'm going to take them to a feed yard and go forward? So how do I know those numbers?
I need to talk to the feed yard. If I'm going to work with if I'm going to feed them myself, or if I'm going to have somebody custom feed them for me, I need to talk to that custom yard. I need to figure out and talk to them what's my cost of gain going to be, what are going to be the other charges, yardage, and and all that kind of stuff. What's feed cost going to be? Are they going to help me market them? Are they going to do some risk management for me along the way, and all those kind of things? So I need to have a really good conversation with that feed yard before I make that decision.
Because like many things, I can get the cost pretty well hammered out. Value of gain, which is what you talked about, is I'm assuming you're calculating that based on what I'm projecting to sell them for, which is a ballpark guess or an estimate. Is that fair?
That's where you come in to work with that feed yard. They've got experience of that, maybe forward contracting, maybe some other kind of hedging or something like that to help you manage that risk.
So, Dustin, I'm going to turn back to you. And since we're talking about risk, you said I may want to avoid that risk. But let's say you're going to go forward with this process. What are the risks you think about post-weaning, and how would you try to mitigate those?
So a couple risks, I guess. What I was initially thinking was a production risk. So possibly, death would be one example. And then also the price risk. But how do you mitigate those? As Phillip talked about, you want to have a relationship with that yard and participate in maybe some kind of futures forward contract would help reduce some of the price risk management. Other risk management from the production side, it could be insurance, something like that. And so definitely would look into some kind of product, whether, contracts, insurance, whatnot, to try to reduce either price or the production risk.
So, and then quick follow-up for both of you. Is there a strategy somewhere in between where I keep them on my operation for 90 to 100 days and then sell them, or then retain ownership? And how would you decide how long I'm going to keep them on my operation after weaning? Phillip, I'm going to go to you first.
Yes, there is. That you could background them on your own operation before you either sell them or transition them to the custom feed yard. And that depends on a couple of different things right off the bat. One, do I have the forage resources or feed resources available? And what's my cost of gain on my operation going to be versus the cost of gain at that yard? And so if I can feed them cheaper and put 200-300 pounds on them before I take them to the finish yard, then good. But if it's cheaper, obviously, to do it at the finish yard, then that would be the better option.
Except I have to have a different cash outlay there. Dustin, do you have a thought on how long you keep them?
I guess I would pencil everything out like Phillip was saying. What's the value gain on your operation? Try to figure out what that value is going to be, and then at a certain point, kind of what that cost versus that additional value added is kind of where that's going to be break even.
Good answers, guys. Phillip ended up with 9 points. Dustin ended up with 8. And hopefully that was helpful to you. If you have other questions you'd like us to answer, send us an email at bci@ksu.edu.
Once again, that was Brad White, Dustin Pendell, and Phillip Lancaster. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.